Hey y'all, welcome to the Coyote Trapping School podcast. Coming at you today. I know I'm a little bit behind. Sorry, I apologize, and I tend to get caught up this week. But I've got a super exciting, I think it's a really neat interview. I really enjoyed it. Interview with Chris Booby. He is a trapper in Australia, so we're going all the way around the world. It actually worked out pretty good because we're 14 hours time difference, so we lined it up to interview him in the morning, and so we interviewed him on Sunday morning, and it was Saturday evening here for me, so that was pretty neat. But he operates CGB Vertebrate Pest Management, and that's a business. Australia has a wide variety of invasive species and feral species, and so that's what he does. Is he's a trapper day to day, and so we talk about the different, some of the different trapping methods that he uses and the equipment he uses. Really not a lot different than what we use here, but it's always neat to see and hear about the ways other people do things. And the driver is one thing that's really interesting to me. Our driver for our trapping and all is heavily centered around fur, and it's totally the opposite down there. They don't have any fur market, and I don't want to run into, because this is a long interview, but they have no fur market. It's just a pest and management objectives that they're working on. So it's pretty interesting. Like I said, I really enjoyed it and enjoyed talking with Chris. The way I actually found him is on Instagram. I follow him. His Instagram is Chris and Shelly Booby, and he's got a Dogger's Life. It's a Dogger's Life YouTube channel, and doggerslife.com, and he said he started a Facebook as well. So go and check him out, see what he's doing. It's pretty neat, the way he's rocking and rolling day to day, catching stuff in Australia. So I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you do. It's a lengthy interview, but it's we could have talked for a lot longer because it was pretty interesting. So listen in, and we'll catch you next time.
So what are you guys full into summer at the moment, or?
Yeah, we were hoping spring was gonna last a little longer, but we had 2 weeks ago, we had temperatures up in the mid to upper 90s, and it's actually cooled down a little bit the last week or so.
Yeah.
But it's raining. We got almost 4 inches of rain today. We had some big storms coming through, so we needed it. We hadn't had rain in probably a month, so I'm not complaining, but it's
yeah, cool. And does that get your sort of coyotes moving around a bit in that?
I don't do much summertime trapping unless I'm doing a job. Even then I try to avoid it. Actually, right now I'm doing some hog trapping. I just got set up with a Jaeger Pro hog trap.
Yeah, I've been seeing that on Instagram that you're smashing them.
Man, we hammered them today. I couldn't believe I had 37 in the trap today. That
really?
was wild.
Yeah, that's cool. That's
so
cool.
That's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've had a bit of experience with the Jaeger Pro trap too. I work with a local government over here, so like the council or county council, I suppose you'd call them over there.
Yeah.
And we've been using a Jaeger Pro trap for deer as well as pigs, or feral pigs, wild pigs we call them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had a fair bit of success with that as well. It's a game changer, isn't it? It just makes it so much easier.
It's pretty awesome. That's what I watch these. I've had a big group of pigs come in before I set the trap, and I set the trap, and then I got the whole trap set up, and I wouldn't have anything coming in. I had a lone boar come in every night, and I hoped he was going to come in last night, and I was going to go ahead and catch him. And he came in. I didn't wake up. He came in, and he didn't stay long. And then this morning about 9 a.m., I got a notification. I looked, and there was just a drove of pigs coming through the gate. And I said, "Holy smokes!" I fired the trap and caught them. So it's pretty impressive what you can do with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what kind of deer are y'all catching in the trap?
We get rooster deer around this particular area where I live now. Out sort of west of here, where I do a bit of work as well, we get red deer.
Yeah.
We call red deer, which I think they're sort of what are they? I think you guys call them elk, don't you, or something like that? Are they elk?
Yeah. We've got elk that they're not. I think there's a difference between the red deer and the elk, but they're pretty darn similar.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we get red deer. We get fallow deer as well around here, and there has been a few reports of chattel or shadow deer as well. Yeah, but right in this area, we're very peri-urban around here. Like we're only sort of 50 minutes out of Brisbane in this particular area, so it's very built up and quite sort of small properties.
Yeah.
Yeah, where I'm working right here. Yeah, so.
Gotcha. So I guess before we get too deep in, why don't you introduce yourself and tell your company and where you're at and all?
Okay. So my name's Chris Booby. I do feral animal pest animal management, we call over here. So I currently work under contract for a local government, but I also do private contract work out west of here as well. So we predominantly run all of southeast Queensland, a little bit into northern New South Wales, but we're just about to do a run right up to the top of Queensland as well, which I'm really looking forward to sort of, have a look what's up there.
And so what is that?
Sorry, mate.
What is that when you're doing these runs and this that you're contracted with, what are you mainly targeting?
Yeah, so we predominantly target wild dogs or dingo cross dogs.
Okay.
Which are a hybrid dingo. Dingoes have been in Australia for about 3,500-4,000 years, and they've over the time eventually bred up with domestic dogs, and they've created this hybrid wild dog, and it's quite a fierce predator. Yeah, they do a lot of damage. They cost Australian farmers like over the $50 million plus a year in losses and issues with them. Yeah, so we do predominantly wild dogs. We do feral pigs as well. Cats, foxes, deer, but predominantly wild dogs. They're the major issue that we sort of try and target.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So y'all got a slew of non-native animal species over there. What are some of the native animals that you have? The only thing I can think of is like a kangaroo.
Yeah. So we have lots of native animals, but none of them really cause significant damage. Like the kangaroos for a long time were culled. Farmers and things would actually cull the kangaroos because of the amount of feed and water that they'd eat. Especially out in the western area. Like there's very little rainfall in our western sort of area. So the kangaroos would come in and obviously eat, like that. A kangaroo would eat as much as 2 sheep in a day. So they actually eat quite a lot of feed and they drink quite a lot of water. So the farmers would cull them to try and keep the numbers down as much as they can.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So they were sort of probably the worst native animal as far as problems, but our native animals are pretty good, really. There's not really anything that causes significant amount of damage that people have to worry about to call us to help them out with them.
Right.
And a lot of them are protected now as well. Like the kangaroos, for instance, farmers can still cull them to an extent, but they have to actually get tags, what they call tags, and they can only cull a few per year sort of thing, just to keep the numbers manageable.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but we've got all sorts of things like quolls. Quolls it's sort of like a Tasmanian devil, if you know what they are. They're like yeah. So a quoll's like a miniature Tasmanian devil, basically. And every now and then you'll hear of them getting into chicken coops and things like that. And predating on some chickens, but people just sort of, it's just a quoll, it's okay, and they just try and fix their coop a bit. Whereas if a fox will get in there, it's the end of the world. They have to get rid of the fox. So.
Right.
Yeah. So no, but apart from that, yeah, our introduced species prey on our natives, and that's another big problem over here. Like we we've got some really nice native animals that have just got no defenses to sort of protect themselves against, like the likes of wild dogs and foxes and cats. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So how did you get into the trapping nuisance work?
Basically, I grew up on land, so my family always sort of around farms and things like that. I started trapping rabbits. We've got rabbits over here as well. Is another problem over here. They sort of another introduced species that cause a lot of erosion and things around creeks and rivers, and so I grew up trapping rabbits with little foothold traps for rabbits.
Yeah.
And eventually sort of got into, my grandfather was always into trapping and trapped for down in the forestry in New South Wales. So he trapped wild dogs and foxes and things like that as well. And then sort of progressed from there. And then I met an old gentleman who'd been trapping and howling and calling dogs for like 70 years. And him and his best mates still were out in the field doing it, and I love that thought of, being able to go out with your mate and help farmers at the same time. So sort of went on with it from there, and a mate of mine, Trent, who you see in my videos, and I at the time were working at a feed and grain store, I suppose you call it, like a local produce store. And we'd have farmers coming in and with problems, oh, my dog's been eaten by wild dogs, or my sheep have been attacked by wild dogs, or my cows, or my horse has been chased through the fence, or whatever. So we started going out of a weekend and putting in traps and trying to check our traps before work. So, we'll get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and we'd travel out, 180 kilometres a day round trip, and then have to go to work at 7 o'clock, and then we'd be at work all day, and then that afternoon going out again. So it was just turning into a massive job. And then eventually we just sort of built up a bit of a client base like that, and we put in for a couple of bigger contracts with some NRM groups, we call them over here. They're like a natural resource management groups.
Yeah.
And then that sort of allowed us then to go and start doing it full time. Yeah, and that was about 8 years ago, I suppose now.
So these is this government contracts, or like the NRM? Is that you're trapping on? Are you still doing work on private ranches or private farms, but it's kind of sponsored through some kind of government system, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they have initiatives. The government have initiatives to help farmers out or landowners out. So the government will set aside a certain amount of money to put towards feral animal management. And those contracts that we had, we'd have to travel out into an area. They'd delegate us an area to go to, and we'd have to go out and knock on doors and just find out who's had problems.
Right.
And then we'd get a group together. So we'd set up like landholder groups, which would involve sort of, depending on the size of the properties, but we would get, 6 or 8 landholders together and form a group. And then we'd go and do some management on that whole area for that particular group. And then we'd move on. And at the end, we sort of had about, I think it was about 150 landholders in all little separate groups around one particular area. And they continue to work together. We've sort of had to move on because the funding has obviously stopped, but they still work together and they do management as a collaborative group sort of thing.
That's great. That sounds real similar to, we have kind of a government program. It's like a government assistance program for farmers and ranchers, but it's all managed through a government agency, the USDA Wildlife Services. And so that's what those guys are. That's what they do, full time, is they're out trapping hogs or beavers, or out west coyotes and lions and different things, So that sounds pretty similar to that program for us.
Yeah. I wish there was more of it. Unfortunately, it'd be, the problem over here, even though the government have done a lot of work for a long time trying to help farmers out, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be getting anywhere. Like we've been successful in getting groups together, which seems to be the hardest problem, because you always have big areas in between those groups that don't do anything, So we've been successful in getting a lot of people together, but it's, for some reason, it just doesn't seem to have made a dent in the population, especially wild dogs and pigs, like they're a massive problem over here still, and they sort of seem to be not sort of getting worse, but just not getting any better,
Yeah.
And I don't know, you guys sort of have seasons over there, but over here it's open for all year round, basically. So we can go out any time of year, as long as we've got permission and doing it the right way, we can hunt or trap or anything all year.
Right. Yeah, that's the way it is over here for most places that have hogs, feral hogs. It's game on, free reign, anytime, anyhow. A lot of states in the southeast where I'm at, beavers and coyotes are also open season. You can trap them or shoot them year round. A lot of the other states consider, your other fur bearers, your foxes and things like that, a fur bearer. And so if you've got a nuisance license, or a landowner gets a permit, you can still do removal of those for kind of wildlife management purposes. But yeah, in general, that stuff is still regulated around the season. So
okay, yeah, right.
So is there any type of fur market or anything in Australia that drives any of what you do, or is it all strictly just kind of a predation based?
Not anymore. Like my parents actually, when I was a baby, used to go out and shoot foxes, and at the time they were like, it was pretty good money. They'd get like up to $30 a fox skin, and I'm pretty sure that buyers used to come in from overseas and actually buy the fur then. But now, no, not really. There's still a little market there, but every now and then you'll get a call for some sort of skin, but yeah, not really. Unfortunately, it's sort of, a lot of it goes to waste, to be honest. If in my opinion, I'd love to see, I'm all for the whole animal getting used for something, not just killing it for the sake of killing it, so it makes it hard. But yeah, unfortunately, that's sort of the market's gone out of it.
Yeah, I want to say in the Fur Fish and Game, which is a big trapper magazine over here, I think probably in the late 70s, early 80s, when the fur boom was big, I'm pretty sure there was at least one or a couple articles about guys from the U.S. going down to Australia trapping red foxes for the market, just because the prices were so good then. But I hadn't heard anything about anybody doing that in a long time.
Yeah, right. We actually had a gentleman, the local government who I work for here, had a gentleman by the name of Ed Carroll, and he come from America originally. I didn't actually get the chance to meet him, unfortunately. He sort of moved on before I started here, but a lot of what the local government do here is all built on the back of his implement. He implemented a lot of the programs and things, and he sort of taught a lot of the people the trapping side of it over here, because they've only been using foothold traps over here, the new style of foothold traps, for about 30 years. Before that, we had the old serrated, like a bear trap, sort of the old lane style bear trap style of trapping it. That, every now and then you still see it around, but that's sort of, he was one of the first guys, I suppose, that implemented using those little, like your Jake traps and things like that. But yeah, he was from over there, and he, I often try and sit down and read a lot of his articles and things that he'd done up while he was over here, and yeah, interesting guy. Yeah.
So that brings up another question. Where do you get your trapping supplies?
We've got a few trapping suppliers over here now, especially in Queensland. We're pretty lucky. We've got sort of 4 that are fairly close. So there's one, Get Trapped. The business name's called Get Trapped. Peter Lincoln is his name. We've got another one, Western Trapping Supplies. He's up in Toowoomba. That's Damien Byrne, his name is. Dave is at the Gold Coast. His business name, what's his business name? Gee whiz, I should know this, but I've just had a mental blank. But yeah, we've got four people in Queensland that are pretty good, and you can get most stuff off those.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so we sort of just try and, support a little bit of it off each one, sort of thing, just to keep them, support them as much as we can.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what's the size of a wild dog?
They range, like, once again, the original dingo sort of dog would only sort of be 15 kilos, or an average of about 15 kilos. Whereas now we're finding that, more and more are sort of averaging around that 18 to 19 kilo mark on an average. It depends where you get them as well. They vary. They vary between areas, and obviously what their food, how much food they've got around and stuff like that as well.
Gotcha. So we're on the pound system over here, so I was just figuring up. So 15 kilos is about 33 pounds, and 20 kilos is, let's see. So that would be 15. So that's like 45 pounds would be 20 kilos. So that would be, the 15 kilos would be pretty on par, a little on the high side for a lot of our coyotes, really.
Okay. Yeah.
So the dingo, is that considered kind of a native to Australia, or is it still kind of considered a?
Yeah, it's a real grey area. In some parts, like in our national parks, they're actually protected under the native animal protection sort of space. But a wild dog isn't. So unfortunately, by looking at them, a lot of the time you can't actually tell. You physically have to get a DNA sample before you can actually physically tell the difference between a purebred dingo. There's not, on the mainland in Australia, there's not a lot of purebred dingoes left. I'd have to say, less than 10% of the wild dogs or dingoes in Australia on the mainland is actually purebred anymore. So national parks are actually trying to preserve that as native dogs and keep them, protected, to try and keep that original bloodline. But a lot of people actually think that they're native animals, native to Australia. They have been around for 3,500 years, but they were introduced. So, it's one of those, it's a very, very touchy subject over here, actually, especially because of what we do trying to control them. It's
right.
People say, aren't they native? And you have to actually explain to them that they're not actually native. They were introduced, and once again, I actually prefer if we could go back to the original old dingo, because they didn't cause the near amount of problems as what we get with the wild dogs.
Right.
This is all my opinion too, obviously, but in my opinion, like a dingo originally, they'd go in and they'd kill, say, a sheep or something like that, and they'd feed on it and eat it as part of their survival. You didn't hear of many stories of dogs going in and killing like 40 sheep in a night, or 50, or 10 calves.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing's happening now with these wild dogs. They're a much bigger, stronger animal, and they go in, and what they do is they grab hold of something like a sheep or even a kangaroo. They'll go grab hold of it, bite it, chew it up as much as they can, and then it'll stop moving because it's buggered, or it's had enough, and then they go off and into another one, So they don't sort of kill to just eat anymore. They kill for fun. And as I said, I put that down to the influence of the domestic dog in the breed, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, that sounds pretty similar because we'll get a lot of times, somebody will have farmers will have issue with something killing a big chunk, several animals, not just one, and they always blame it on a coyote. But in my experience, it usually winds up being domestic dogs that if there's more than one or two killed, usually it seems like it's domestic dogs, but nobody recognizes or even thinks about that over here. They just think the coyote is nobody's real big on him anyway, so quick to put him down anyway.
So are a coyote what breed are they? Are they like a dog, or are they like over here, like the foxes obviously are more sort of closely related to a cat rather than a dog.
Yeah.
So what are the coyotes?
Yeah, I would say coyotes are more related to a dog. They're in like a mini version of a wolf. I mean, you can tell the difference looking at a coyote and most any dog, but they're definitely, and there's a lot of folks that'll talk about coy dogs is what they'll call them, and coyotes breeding with dogs, and I don't think that really happens as much as they think it does. But yeah, they're much more in the dog family, I guess you could say.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering that if they could breed with the dogs, you guys would have the similar problem to us then with this hybrid killing machine.
I guess it's not as, I don't know, because there's no shortage of dogs running around, and coyote populations are steady going up. So, but you don't usually see that a lot for whatever reason. I don't know, but that would be because you're talking a lot of our coyotes. People are not good judges of size, and so you'll hear people pretty commonly talk about like a 50-pound coyote, which would be like 22 kilos. But I weigh just about, if I can, I weigh every one I catch, and rarely do I have one over 30 pounds, which are right around that 15-kilo mark. I mean, that 50 pounds is a big critter to be running around.
Yeah, they do. They are. Yeah, absolutely. It's scary, really. Have you ever been in a real scary situation where are they aggressive to humans, coyote?
No, for the most part, there's some issues because they are very adaptable to urban environments, and so any major city in the U.S., there's coyotes living in Atlanta, Chicago, New York. I mean, they're sly enough that they get around, and a lot of people don't see them. But you'll have in those instances where there've been a couple of cases where people have gotten bitten by one. Most of the time the coyotes after their little fluffy dog that they're walking and it just happens. But I mean, I've never been in a situation, out in the woods or anything where any coyote was anywhere aggressive. I mean, you even see that on the trap line. If you catch one, 99% of the time when you walk up to him in that trap or you get close, he cowers down and he won't look at you in the eye. Whereas like a gray fox, he's jumping and lunging, and he'd eat you up if he could get loose of the trap, So that's not something that I've ever experienced, a coyote being real aggressive like that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Sorry to get off track there. I was just interested in that. So.
No, that's fine. So have you experienced wild dogs being like that, though?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to an extent in the trap, I think they're like any sort of animal, they're flight or fight, So if they get backed into a corner, they definitely turn aggressive. When they're in a trap, we don't like to muck around with them too much, as far as leaving it too long before we dispatch them, because we have rules over here, Animal Care and Protection Act. So it's an act we work under. So we have to be real careful as far as leaving them. But a lot of them will try and get away, but you do get those big old dogs that, have been around for a long time that will turn sort of aggressive and sort of lunge at you. Yeah, but definitely, you know, I've been in situations where I was actually down in a little sandy creek bed, like a dry creek bed, and I always take my dogs with me when I can to use them as like scent dogs, I suppose. And I had a young dog with me this morning, and we were down in this creek bed, and my dog sort of went off after a scent up this creek bed, and he was a really good dog. I'd call him and he'd come back usually, you know. And this day he just kept going, and I'm like, oh, I'm meant to be getting dogs off this property, not leaving more on here, you know. So I followed him up a little bit, and it just got too thick. I couldn't get past there anymore, so I was just there calling him for about 20 minutes. I was just singing out, whistling, and I thought, oh, he's probably been killed by the wild dogs or whatever, you know. I didn't hear anything. But anyway, I went back to the car, and my wife was there, and I said to Michelle, you know, Dane's gone. And she's like, what? And so she went down and started calling him. So we're there for probably 3/4 of an hour just trying to find this dog, you know. And then I thought, I'll just go down one more time and have another call. So I went down there, and I could hear like something running up the river or the creek, the dry creek bed, and it had puddles of water. So you'd hear something splashing, and it was coming towards me. Next thing you know, he comes up, and he's actually playing with a wild dog. They're playing like pups would, you know, and fiddling around, and the wild dog didn't see me. So I'm standing there, and I'm just watching, and I'm sort of freaking out a little bit. I didn't know really what to think. Next thing, my dog comes right up to me, and the wild dog just stopped and looked at me and took off, you know. That was pretty cool, you know. But then I thought, well, I've been employed to get onto this property and get rid of these things, so I might as well take the opportunity. So I went back down there with my gun, and it was just getting on dark, and I locked my dogs up, and I had a howl. So we sort of howl for dogs as well and try and call them into us. So I had a howl, and it was just going on dark, and within 2 minutes I was surrounded by dogs. So like I could actually physically hear 7 different dogs right around me, and they were going off like howling full on.
Oh.
But I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it. But yeah, it was a scary situation because you know, my gun that I use, I was thinking I've got 4 bullets and I can hear at least 7 dogs, but you know, nothing probably would have happened. But in that situation, I was pretty scared, that's for sure.
Huh.
Yeah. So, and actually, Trent, who you see on the videos, he was actually attacked by a wild dog. So he was down setting a trap one day, and the previous day we'd been around the farm with the farmer like we do. We go around with them, and they show us the areas where the dogs are. So he was down, and we've seen a like a steer, so an adult male cow that's been desexed. We call them steers. I don't know if you call it steers. Yeah. So a big bullock steer, down with 3-day. It's like a sickness that they get, and we've seen 5 dogs trying to get to it, and this steer was sort of fighting them off. That was the day before. So the next day we're out there putting traps in, and I was up one end of the property, and Trent was down the other, and yeah, he was down on his knees as you do, putting a trap in, and a dog sort of ran at him and attacked him from behind. And he's a big dude, like you've probably seen him on the videos, like. And I always tell him that the dog thought he was that cow on the ground, you know. And yeah, but that was an instance that you don't hear of very often.
Right.
Definitely, like we have had a couple of deaths of kids over here from dingoes, where they've been camping and dogs have come in, or dingoes have come in and grabbed the kids out of the tents and things like that. There's been like, yeah, people attacked when they're walking, and sort of a pack of dogs have sort of attacked them. And yeah, but once again, I think it's just because of human, you know, errors by feeding them. So a lot of people over here will feed them.
Right.
And the dogs lose all that sense of fear towards humans, and they think that they're the apex predator, and they'll try and attack, you know.
So that brings up an interesting point. How is the wild dog trapping and that program viewed by the public? Because I can only imagine over here, people are just over the top about dogs and their dogs. And, if somebody sees a dog out in a yard that's chained up, heaven forbid, he's on a chain and they're going to call somebody because he ought to be running free or something, and that I could see that just going really sideways here. How is that viewed there?
Yeah, it's up until it's funny because we do definitely get I suppose you'd call them minority groups that definitely totally against it. They can't see or understand the logic behind what we do. And I say to them, you've got to come out to a farm with me where the poor farmers lost 150 sheep, in the last 12 months. That's their whole livelihood, that's what they survive on, and they're scared to go out in the paddock because they'll go out there and there'll be another 10 dead sheep or, mutilated sheep where these poor sheep will walk around with their guts dragging along behind them, But unfortunately, there are minority groups that don't understand that. As far as the general public, it's pretty good still. I say that because this whole, the whole country really is starting to turn around as far as that side of thing goes. Unfortunately, I don't know why it's happened, but we're starting to sort of give in to the minority groups a lot over here, and they're getting more and more influence. So up until now, we're still pretty good with the general public, and we try and do things, the best for the animal as we can anyway. So, even the general public, if they see cruelty to animals, they'll still, get their back up about it. So we try and keep things low key as low key as we can, and do it as humanely as we can as well, So that always helps. I think if people see someone going out and purposely hurting animals, which does happen here, they'll go out and, not purposely, but they do the wrong thing, and then people get upset about it. And that doesn't make our job easier either. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have definitely a little bit of the same thing we call them anti-hunters, anti-trappers, that are just there's no sense in arguing or debating with them because you're not changing their mind. But just I could very well see it, especially over here, like just the name change. If we called coyotes, wild dogs instead of coyotes, I don't think it would go as smoothly. But having a little differentiation there between dog, and I think that buys us a lot. As ridiculous as that kind of is. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, how we could sort of over here, have a certain name for the wild dogs as well, rather than calling them wild dogs, because, I even think that to a point, you guys having like a cartoon of the old Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner and stuff like that probably helped people settle into coyotes are a problem.
Right.
I don't know. I just think that having the name wild dog is, as you said, it's just people think, oh, it's a dog, whereas if we could call them something different, would definitely help out a bit.
Yeah.
And definitely not call them a dingo, because then we'd be in the other,
Right.
So, yeah.
So talking about shifting into your trapping equipment, what kind of traps do you use, and what's your kind of your setup for trapping?
So we a lot of the time, well, everyone's different obviously over here still, but I use a ground sheet, what I call a ground sheet, which is just a bit of canvas that I lay down in front of where I'm going to be setting a trap. The main reason for that, for me, is to hold all my dirt that I get out of the hole, that sits on the ground sheet, to stop it from spreading around, making a bit of a mess. Over here, we try and keep everything looking exactly the same before we put the trap in, after we've put the trap in. So we want it to look exactly the same, because the wild dogs here, especially the older dogs that have been around for a while, are quite wise onto, people setting traps and things. So they're pretty smart, you know. So if they notice anything out of the ordinary at all, they'll clear off. So I have my ground sheet, I have my sieve to sieve the dirt in.
Right.
I've made like a hatchet, I think you call them, like a little axe.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the head off a little axe, and I've welded on a piece of metal pipe as my digging tool, and I can also use that as a hammer to hammer my pegs in. My traps, I sort of use anything from like your, what do you call them, a 1.5 Duke.
Yeah.
So a smaller trap for foxes, right up to, I use Bridger number 3s, but we modify them and turn them into like a dogless Bridger.
Yeah.
Number 3. And we obviously put the base plates and the Jake chain set up with your shock spring and things like that on them as well. But my favourite trap is an MB650. I just like the fact that they're really compact and they're strong and they're fast, and there's no maintenance with them. As long as you keep them clean and keep your latches nice and clean and lubed up, or waxed, they work. They just continue to work. Whereas all the other traps, I've always had problems with little bits and pieces going wrong with them, except for your Jakes. Jakes have always been a really good trap. I use them as well. But the MB650s are just that little bit smaller, and they just, you don't have to dig as big a hole, and they just hang on pretty well. Yeah.
So do you use rebar for staking your traps?
Yeah, so we always put two or rebar in, 2 pegs, we call them.
Right.
I personally love using drags in certain areas as well. I just find that, especially on like a trail set or something like that, I'll use a drag 9 times out of 10 on a trail set when I can, because it just keeps that area nice and tidy. Also, I've just started using the disposable stakes, or your disposables, because in some areas it's just the ground's that hard that you can't physically get 2 pegs in. Right. And a drag won't work in that area. It might be a little bit close to town or something like that, and you don't want whatever it is you're catching running onto like a roadway or anything. So I use a disposable anchors. I haven't been able to get onto any chain anchors yet. How some people over there, they use like a chain anchor instead of cable. I haven't been able to find any of those here yet, but I definitely like the wolf fang anchors. I use them a little bit, but I'm starting. Sorry, mate. I'm starting to use more and more of them these days. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what most anybody up here now is using some form of the disposable stakes, whether it's the chain stakes that you can pull out or the wolf fangs have gotten real popular. That's what I've been using the past 3 seasons, I guess. It's just so much easier than having to deal with rebar and keeping up with your pegs, and just takes up a whole lot less room and all. So it's pretty convenient.
And the weight factor as well. Like by the time you carry all your gear with you, it's just tremendous amount of weight. So if you can cut that down as much as you can,
right.
Yeah. That's what we're finding now. As we're sort of progressing with the business, we're getting bigger and bigger properties as well. So sometimes, most of the time, we'll only have properties where it's only feasible to have like 10 traps in the ground or 20 traps in the ground. Some properties we only have 2 or 3 traps in the ground, those smaller blocks. But now, as we're progressing and getting further and further afield, like out into the western areas and northern areas, we're putting like 60, 70 traps in the ground. So it's a lot of gear when you've got 70 traps plus all your chain, plus your pegs.
Right.
So that's a lot of weight. So, and our vehicles aren't as big and set up over here as what you guys have. So,
Yeah.
They can't carry as much weight. Yeah.
So how do you treat your traps? Do you trap dye or what do you do before you set them?
Yeah. So I'll when I get a new trap, I'll wash it off with a bit of hot water and sort of a non-scented detergent. I'll give them a really good wash. Then I'll leave them out for a week or two to sort of let them get rusty or a coat of rust on them. And near the coast here, that only takes a week or two. Sometimes when we were sort of out west in the western areas, I'd give them a bit of a spray with like vinegar or something just to promote that rust. Then I'll wash them off again just with a pressure washer. We boil them up in water by itself for about 5-10 minutes, just on a rolling boil. Then I introduce, I just use the logwood trap dye. Or if I haven't got any of that, I've always tried to keep a good supply of that. But if I can't find any or I'm out and don't have any on me, I'll use like a local bark off some trees and just put in just to colour the water a little bit. And then, any of your black wax or anything like that, just a bit of black wax. And what I do is I put that on top of the water. So I only put like a section of my wax block. I'll put that on top of the water and let it like film over the top, melt over the top, and then pull my traps out through it.
Gotcha.
So I do that every time before I go out into a new property. If I'm on the same property for 10 days or something like that, usually I have enough traps to carry me through. But if I'm going out to reset on the same property, the clean traps I'll just reset in that same spot, like those same spots. But if I'm going onto a new property, I always clean my traps and reboil my traps.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I noticed you seem to use game cameras a pretty good bit for kind of scouting or checking out your properties. How do you use those?
So there, once again, as we've progressed, our business has gotten bigger. We've been able to afford to buy some more. So we'll go out and we'll put in cameras like a couple of weeks before we go onto the property to actually trap it into areas where we think there might be dogs traveling through. So we'll go out, check for sign. If there's sign of dogs or whatever we're targeting, we'll put cameras in just to monitor it for about 2 weeks before we go out. And what we found is that helps us locate where the dogs are traveling or foxes are traveling on that particular property. Rather than going out, what we used to do is we'd go out and just cover the whole place in traps. All those areas like your intersections and things like that, we just target every intersection on a property and put traps in. Whereas now with the cameras, we're finding that even the bigger properties, dogs will or foxes will only mainly use one particular area on that property. Sometimes, once you get there, it all changes, as you probably know. Like you'll put in set some traps, and then you'll go there and catch a few targeted animals, and the dogs will move off to another section of the property. So then it changes, but you just sort of have to shift. But we've just found it saved us a lot of time on that initial day or initial couple of days when we're putting in our first lot of traps. The cameras will tell you how often they're traveling through and where they're traveling. Yeah.
So how many cameras are you usually using, and how do you decide where to put those?
So aerial maps we use, so we've got Google Earth that we use a lot. So we'll go on, say we get a call from a landowner that's got a problem, we go onto Google Earth, check out that property and just look for those major, vegetation changes, intersections between roads and fence lines or dams. So then we identify those locations. Then we'll go onto the property and physically look for sign. And then if there's sign and it is a good location, as what we think might be a good location, we'll put a camera in there. And then we'll go to the other areas and there might not be any sign, but we'll still put a camera up there because, they might change within that month that we've had the cameras out, or within that month where we've had the call, and they might even still be on their travel route. So, dogs over here, they, depending on the pack size, depending on the food, depending on their home range, can vary quite a lot. So they can sort of either get to a particular spot on a property every day or every couple of days, or it could be every week, or it could be every month. So it varies quite a bit. So the cameras actually help us out as far as, how often they're getting past that particular spot.
Gotcha. What do you usually run them in pictures or video mode?
I've always only ever used pictures up to about 12 months ago, and I started using video, or 18 months ago now, and I love video. Video now is just, it tells you so much more, like you try and piece together your pictures, but video just really opens your eyes up and it shows you exactly what that animal's doing. Yeah, I love video.
What kind of cameras are you running? Because one thing I usually have a couple that I try to set on where I set traps to see how a coyote comes in and what happens. But the thing I found is it's hard to find a camera that'll do longer than like 20 or 30-second night video, which that don't do you a whole lot of good. What kind of cameras do you like?
Yeah, we've got I used to love the old Alcorns or Acorn cameras.
Yeah.
I had a couple of those right back from years ago that just continued to work. But as I've progressed, I sort of found that the more you spend on the camera, the more you get out of it. Definitely, we with the local government here, I'm able to use like the real good Reconyxes and things like that, and they do a really good job, But unfortunately, we can't afford many of those, so we just go and buy like your mid-range. Like we've got a couple of Wild Garter cameras that are working really good for us at the moment. The local trapping supplies guys actually label their own cameras over here. I think they're pretty well the similar camera, like a Scout Guard camera, but they turn it into like their own particular brand.
Right.
So we've got a few of those as well, but I'm pretty sure they're Scout Guard. Just recently, I've bought a couple of Vimmel cameras, and I'm just trialing them at the moment, and they seem to be doing a good job as well, and they're a good price as well. Yeah, but definitely the more expensive ones are definitely quite much better. But yeah, once again, it's what you can afford at the time, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So with your sets, what's your primary couple of sets that you use when you're actually trapping, targeting wild dogs?
Predominantly just flat sets or scent post sets, and then in areas where the dogs are quite a little bit smarter, we'll start to put in a few trail sets or blind sets. They're the main sort of sets we use. Dirt hole sets in areas where it's in close proximity to towns and things, where the dogs are coming onto like a 5-acre block or a 2-acre block. We'll use a dirt hole set there, but what we do is we do a little bit of what we call pre-feeding to start off with. Mm-hmm. So we'll actually dig a hole, encase a bit of food in the hole, and get whatever it is coming to dig it up. Works quite well on foxes, we've found, where the foxes will just then come every night to that particular spot. So we'll just put a dirt hole set in there and end up catching a fox, And that I've started introducing dirt holes a little bit out west, but for some reason, older dogs especially, young dogs you always get on dirt holes, but the older dogs seem to not sort of go near the dirt hole sets. Once again, I think that just comes down to when, a dog's been around for a little while, anything different, they just sort of, any fresh dirt and things, they'll just clear out. So, yeah.
So what scents are you using for your flat sets?
What scents? Like lure?
Lure. Yeah.
Depending on which time of year it is. So at the moment in winter, the dogs are sort of, they're just nearly past their breeding cycle, but I'll use a lot of gland lure over here. Once again, there's a couple of local manufacturers that actually make wild dog gland lure over here, and I use a lot of those this time of year. Moving on to sort of into the summer months, I'll start to use a little bit of food or curiosity lures, which is, is a food-based lure or sort of something with a bit of what do you call it, skunk sort of smell in it, which is more of a curiosity, which you get the young dogs very curious of what that smell is, and even to the point where they'll try and roll in it or something like that, and that's when you'll get them, Yeah. So yeah, it varies on the time of year, but I personally have moved more towards using the gland lures most times a year, and obviously dog urine and my dogs, using them as scent dogs, they'll mark a spot and I'll put sets on there a lot too, and not use any lure at all,
Right.
Yeah. Unless I get to an area where there might be a couple of young dogs getting around, I don't sort of take my dogs in, because I've found that can sort of frighten off the young dogs that are in that particular area, thinking that it's another dog in their area and they clear out. Yeah.
So what do you do when you make a catch? Do you reset that set? Do you move it a little bit?
Yeah, no, we reset it. So we, once again, you sort of try different things, but we went from resetting it to changing the trap in the same location. Then we went to setting a trap like a foot outside the trap circle, just moving it that little bit. And now we've basically gone back to resetting the same trap in that same location, unless it's busted up, but setting the same trap in the same location, just putting a bit of backing there and a couple of stepping guides, and putting another set just outside the trap circle somewhere, just off that area. We've found that's, why not do both sort of thing. We found, because you always get those dogs that won't walk inside that trap circle, and you'll get dogs that love going inside there and sniffing around the whole area. So, yeah, we've been quite successful in catching a couple of dogs the night after we catch the first initial dog in that same location. So, yeah.
So when you're putting your sets in, how do you usually put 2 at the time, or if you've been seeing 5 or 6 dogs on the camera, do you go in there with 6 or 8 traps? How do you set a location up?
Yeah, and it depends on the location itself too. Like intersections, definitely. Even if we haven't had any dogs coming through there on camera, if it's a good intersection where in the back of your mind that the dogs at one stage are going to come past that spot, we'll whack in a couple, at least 2 or 3 on an intersection. If it's just like a flat set along a trail or something where there's been 2 dogs coming through, we might only put 3 traps in. One big thing I try and do is not to overcrowd one particular area with traps. I've just found that once again, it can be too overwhelming. There'll be just too much scent around there for the dogs, and they don't even use it then, But you always have to have more traps in than dogs, obviously, going through there. So it's quite a hard balance between putting too many in and not enough.
Right.
Yeah. So you just got to sort of feel out what particular area you're in and how much lure you want to use, and so.
Just had another question. I was thinking.
Yeah.
I lost it. What were we talking about? Setting traps. I don't know. I'll think of it in a minute. Oh, your foot guides. So you said you typically like to blend everything in, so you can't. There's nothing there. What do you use, and where do you place your foot guides?
So when I'm putting a trap in, once again, just for a flat set, like I always sort of use the rule, I actually use my arm. So I pretend that that's the dog's nose, if you like, or that's the dog's nose, and about where my elbow is, where it goes down to the ground, is where I'm going to put my trap. So I pretend that, this is a dog going in and sniffing something, that's where his foot's going to be. And we always sort of offset it a little bit from the center. And then, so my foot guides, I'll just put literally like a little stick, sort of an inch long or something like that, and just put it on the edge of my jaw. So he has to take that little bit extra step. I used to put one on the inside of that as well, between my trap and my lure. I used to sort of have something there as well, but I've found that I don't really need to do that anymore, and just have gone away from that now. And I more try and concentrate on where I'm putting my lure compared to my trap now, rather than putting too many stepping guides in. When I first started, I used to have massive stepping guides, like a big, like inch round stick in front of my trap and stuff. But I've just found that if you sort of get the confidence enough to put your lure in the right spot and your trap in the right spot, sometimes you don't need your stepping guides, So, but when I'm resetting, I'll go to the other extent. Like if I'm resetting in a particular spot, I'll put a lot of stepping guides in. Then to just stuff that's out of that trap circle, I'll just sort of pile it up in areas to try and really force the dog to go to that one spot,
Yeah.
I'll collect all the blood and stuff and pile it in where I think is the right spot from, where the dog's foot's got to go. So, yeah. I hope that answers you sort of what you were after.
Yeah. So I noticed I think it was in one of your videos, when you were using some expandapans.
Yeah.
Large. How do you like those? What's your impression on those?
We don't like them at all.
Really?
We only used them that one trip, and we had a couple of toe catches, and one trap was sort of fired off, and we didn't know whether it had caught something or, and got out. But definitely, we found that the expander pan puts their foot too close to the jaw sometimes, and they can be treading right on the edge of the pan, which is also on the edge of the jaw, and we think that it might be flicking their foot nearly out of the trap.
Right.
So it's just, I like having the bigger pans, but I don't think you should go to that extent.
Yeah.
And that's in our experience with them. Yeah.
Yeah, Senator, I put 6 on this past trapping season, and it really wasn't enough to get a good feel, because I'm just rotating and using a bunch of different traps. So, but I've been reading a book. It's Craig O'Gorman, which is he's a big time control trapper up in Montana. So he's made his living catching it. Apparently, the sheep industry used to be real big in the American West, and I guess over the last 30 years or so, I guess maybe it's transitioned more to beef and less to sheep. And that's, I think there was obviously more conflict with the coyotes and predation with sheep versus cattle. But he talks a lot about using either steel screen pan covers to increase the surface area that'll cause the trap to fire, or a larger pan. That's something I've been thinking a lot on. So what do you use for a pan cover?
Depends on the type of ground, but a lot of the time I just use unscented paper towel.
Yeah.
So it's but if we go into real wet areas, we use like your baking paper, or your oven sort of grease-proof paper. I don't like that so much, but I haven't had a lot of problems with it as such. But it's just sort of, I find that it's really noisy, but by the time whatever it is steps on there, it's too late for them anyway, So it worked quite good as far as, reflecting the water and stuff if you're in like a quite wet area. I did at one stage use just organza. It's like a dress sort of material, but
Yeah.
it's quite fiddly, and I found that it's quite, a little bit can be sticking up and it comes through your dirt and things like that. So I just gone away from that. So I use either baking paper, paper towel, or every now and then I'll use some sort of fly screen material. But once again, it's just sort of too rigid, I find, and you can't sort of bed it or get it nice and bedded real well. So
Right.
yeah, that's what I mainly use.
Well, we're clicking on just over an hour, and I think we've kind of hit on all the topics that I was wanting to. So I guess one thing that we talk a lot about here in the U.S. is trying to encourage young trappers and try to get new trappers into the the lifestyle, I guess you could say, or the into trapping, because that's one thing that with hunting and trapping is there's not as much exposure, and so just trying to do what we can to bring people in and younger people in, I guess, to really carry on the tradition. How is that? Is that something that's it's on the radar for y'all down there? Is there much interest in trapping?
There is, and yeah, there is. More and more people are starting to get into it again now. I think probably because that's more of social media. Hunting's always been a big thing here, and pig hunting and things like that with dogs and shooting and stuff. But as far as trapping goes, it wasn't really a big thing, especially when I first started getting into it a bit more about, say, 8-10 years ago. It wasn't a real big thing at all, but now, because of social media, people are starting to see that, it's quite fun, and they seem to get out, get all the gear, go at it for about 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden they haven't caught anything, and they've spent all this money on petrol and, done all these miles, and they sort of give it away, which is a bit unfortunate. But it's definitely something that we try and promote. Our business, we do a lot of training events and things like that where we'll go out and do like workshops. And that's something that I want to try and build on as far as education side of things goes, because a lot of people are starting out and they're having a go, but they're just going about it the wrong way, and it makes it harder for everyone else then, So I want to try and sort of build on that, doing things the right way and doing things where it's humane to the animals for starters, and also you're not going to make it harder for the next bloke if you lose a dog out of a trap or something, Right. We've got a lot of trap shy dogs, especially in this area where I work now, that are been around for a long time, so they know the whole process, So if we can educate people on doing it the right way, I'm all for it, Yeah, rather than just going out, giving them a trap, or them going and buying a trap and them going out and working it out for themselves. I just think that they should be more training events where they're getting the right people doing it the right way. Yeah.
So I guess as a wrap up, what would be your biggest your advice for somebody that's kind of interested, wanting to get into it, but doesn't know, what the first step to be?
Probably, I think that there should be like nearly an apprenticeship where you go out with a trapper or someone that's doing it professionally for an amount of time, and actually learn off them, as much as you can. Watch as many videos, YouTube videos. Like, YouTube's a brilliant thing now. You can learn anything off YouTube, So watch as many YouTube or buy some DVDs and read books as much as you can, I still thrive off watching other people do their stuff. Like, I watch your videos and I love it because everyone does something a little bit differently, So I watch as many as I can. I think someone starting out should do that and not get the wrong idea. Like, people that have been doing it for a long time, they show you all their, I suppose their success stories, but they never show on YouTube and things their hard times in between,
Yeah.
And that's something that I want to start bringing out in our videos. It might go the wrong way for us, but I want to show that in between time, where you might go on a 4 or 5 days on a property without catching anything, and you've put in all that hard work and you've put in, 50 or 60 sets and still not caught anything. People don't see that sort of thing. So I think just have a realistic idea of what you actually want to catch, your targets and things like that. And also probably not judge your success on the amount of numbers that you catch, more about, the less in predations, like the less predations that are happening on the properties, things like that,
Yeah.
Like in this particular area, they've had a really good baiting program. I don't know, you guys don't bait over there as far as try and poison animals, do you?
No.
Over here, we've got what we call baiting programs where we put inject 1080 into like meat, fresh meat.
Yeah.
And we give that to farmers, and farmers go and put it out on their properties for the dogs to dig them up, and eventually it kills the dog, It's quite safe as far as it's actually derives from a plant in Australia, the gidgee bush, the poison does.
Huh.
So all of our native animals aren't affected by it, hardly at all, like they have to have a lot of it before it affects them. So here in this particular area, we've got a really good program where we bait, we trap, and, it's gone from over 10 years, farmers have gone from losing 30 calves a year to basically nothing, from that persistence in there's not, now we go out and we're lucky to catch 20 dogs a year here in traps in this particular area. But that's, it's not saying that we're not doing the job right. It's just that there's less dogs because of that ongoing problem.
Right.
So I think if you judge this area, you'd say, well, now they're not losing 30 calves a year. We've done a pretty good job. And I think more people should start looking at things like that rather than, I went out and caught 200 dogs, for the year, whatever. So, yeah, that'd be a bit of the advice that I'd try and put across to them, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. I remember it just really stands out in my mind. One of the guys that got me started trapping, and we were doing some beaver trapping, nuisance beaver trapping, and one of the things he said, success is boring. Because if you're doing your job is not to catch 200 wild dogs. Your job is really not to catch any wild dogs, because that means you already caught them and you're controlling them,
Yeah.
So it's kind of counterintuitive to a lot of folks, but it's and it doesn't make the trap line near as fun, but that's what you're going after, right? So
Exactly, yeah, that's right, And once again, I think that's what I'm going to be trying to bring across in my videos. I've sort of tried to think about what I can do differently in the videos, and I think it might not make me as popular than other people, but it's actually telling the truth,
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Now, just from my experience, this is 2 seasons, trapping seasons, that I've gone and doing a video every day that I check traps, whether I catch something or not. And
Yeah.
I've gotten, all the comments, and everybody appreciates that, because, that's what you experience on your own trap line, So especially somebody just starting out, I think that kind of gives them some, I guess, some reason to, not everybody catches something every day. That's just the way it is, So I've gotten a lot of good feedback from that. So I think that'd be worthwhile for sure.
Yeah, good stuff. Yeah, no, that's good. It's good to hear. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I mean, that wraps up everything that I've kind of had jotted down. So for people to find you, you got It's a Dogger's Life on YouTube, and Chris and Shelly Booby on Instagram.
Yep. And we've set up Facebook now too, just under Chris Booby. We sort of, we're pretty new to social media, so we're just starting to work out how to work it properly, you know. And we went off it for a long time because of the, you know, the people putting their meals on there and stuff like that. Like, we're just not interested in seeing that sort of thing. So, but we're starting to promote the business a bit now and line up our social media. So, yeah, hopefully we'll be getting into it a bit more and definitely doing more videos. We've quite enjoyed doing those. So it just takes a lot of time, as you know, to edit them together. And, you know, a lot of the time I'm out by myself as well. So you can't film and do stuff at the same time. So, you know, you might do something and then you're like, oh, I should have filmed that. But by then you have to move on to the next job. So, yeah, but definitely we want to try and get into more videos and doing some more stuff like that. So keep an eye out on YouTube, I suppose, the most.
Yeah, for sure. Well, is there anything you wanted to cover? You said you might have some questions, so we've been at it a while, but I'm enjoying talking, so I'm not in a rush to get off. So I'm here as long as you want to talk.
Cool, man. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I've just got a few questions written down as well, very similar to yours, but yeah, I just sort of thought, how did you get into what you do now? Like, how was your beginnings?
So I started. My family grew up hunting, kind of like what you said. You know, my dad got me into hunting and fishing, and so I kind of grew up enjoying being in the woods. And like you said, we're stuck with seasons here. So my dad always we squirrel hunted some, and then deer season was you know, only so long. So I was always looking for an excuse to be in the woods longer. So I started bow hunting because I could get longer deer season. And then my uncle had some old fur fishing game magazines, and I started reading through those. And I think really the stories about the Alaskan bush trappers, you know, living in a cabin in the wilderness and running their trap lines, that just really intrigued me. And I think that's what kind of got me hooked on trapping. And my uncle, he had trapped a little bit, but not a whole lot. And so I would talk to him about it every time we were around. And actually got involved over here. Most of our states have state trapping associations. And so they have conventions and meetings where all these trappers gather together, and they have demonstrations and trap suppliers selling stuff. And so I found out about that and went to one of those, and just had a couple of guys, kind of like you said with The Apprentice, just a couple of guys that saw me as a, you know, somebody that was eager to learn, and they really took me under their wing and invited me to go trapping with them, and, you know, kind of show me, you know, the way they did it. And that just set it off from there. So that was I've we have our fur seasons and our fur trapping, you know, and so that's mainly what I have done over the last 15 years. But we have, you know, a nuisance trapping license, and you know, you can get licensed to catch, and depending on where you are, you know, it's either squirrels in attics or raccoons in attics or things like that. But then it can also be, you know, coyotes after sheep or cattle, or beaver damming up ponds and flooding timber or agriculture. And so that's kind of, I've done a little bit of that off and on in the past, but that's kind of what I've tried in the last 2 years to kind of focus more on and put more effort into, kind of like you growing that business. Ideally, I mean, that would, if I could find some way to kind of be trapping year round, that's what I would really like to be doing. So
yeah, definitely. It's a fantastic lifestyle, isn't it? Like, it's, yeah, I've always said that I was born 100 years too late, you know, like,
yeah.
I would love to have been back in the day. But anyway, okay, so I suppose you should introduce yourself a little bit as well. So
Yeah.
tell us about, your business.
So my name's Chris Pope. I'm in Georgia in the United States, and I run a website, YouTube, Instagram channel called Coyote Trapping School. And so it's, you know, it's all, you know, education oriented and geared towards people that are interested. One of the things that I noticed is whenever I was out and around and talking with people, when they found out that I was a trapper, that's something that everybody was interested in. Oh man, I'd really like to know how to do that. Or me and my granddad, you know, I ran traps with my granddad years ago, but it's so hard, you know, nobody knows where or how to get started. And so I started doing some YouTube videos and different things just because I could, reach so many more people. And I started in 2013, December of 2013, and it's just been slow and steady. And that's one of the unglamorous, one of the things that it's kind of like trapping, I guess. Nobody wants to hear about, but everybody wants to post a video and get 1 million views. And it takes a long time of putting stuff out to get very much attention.
Yeah.
That's that's what I've done, and everything my platforms have grown pretty well, and I've got people that message me telling me that they caught their first beaver or first coyote or something like that from watching my video. So it's been really really neat and exciting to do that. And so that's what, like I said, I do my live trap line. I also have a trapping course that you can access on my website. That's geared, all my information. I don't hold anything back from what I put on YouTube, but it's none of it's really put together a lot. It's a set here and a set here, and how do I set, prepare my traps. And my online course is all kind of a one-stop shop where it walks you through, buying traps, dyeing them, getting your tags on them, stakes and sets, and so it's kind of a more, if you're wanting to, spend a couple hours watching videos and then go do it versus spending a couple days trying to watch videos and piece things together. So.
Okay. So is there like a link or something that everyone can go and just click on, and that'll send you the details to access your course?
Yeah. It's I was trying to think of one that would be it's coyotetrappingschool.com /Dogger. How about that? coyotetrappingschool.com/Dogger, and that'll be
Okay.
that'll take it to my course and see what I've got there.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, cool. So do you predominantly work around your home where you work, where you live there, or do you travel far or for your work?
No, so that's everything that I do is local. So I have a full-time job as well. So
Yep.
I'm trapping, like you said, I'm trapping in the mornings or in the evenings. Close enough that I can run my trap line and still make it to work and make it home. So I've done a couple of, this past year I went to Ohio for a week trapping, and next year, or it's actually this coming season, I'm trying to work out a trip to go to South Texas for a couple weeks trapping. But other than that, yeah, everything's local. I sleep in my own bed every night. So
Yeah, fair enough. And what's your favorite bait or lure that you use? Have you got a favorite bait or lure that you use, or?
not really. I use one that I've used a lot lately, and I like it. Is it's made by Rusty Johnson, he's actually a Georgia trapper. I actually got a chance to, me and him went and trapped Texas right after I graduated from college. We got to trap for about 3 weeks in Texas, and that was awesome because there's a lot of game in South Texas. And so he makes a bait called Lucky, and I've used it for the past probably 4 years, and I've had real good luck with it. But I'll have a couple baits or lures that I use over and over, but I'm always trying to try at least 1 or 2 new lures every year just to kind of see what's working and see what else is out there.
Yeah. And you predominantly do dirt hole sets?
Yeah, a lot of what I do. Usually I'll set 2 traps at a location, and one will be a dirt hole and one will be like a flat set.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So what would be your advice to someone starting out in the game over there?
So over here in the U.S., the best advice I would have is look up your state trappers association. And actually, if you go to, I think it's coyotetrappingschool.com/resources, I've got a list, clickable links of every state with every state trappers association. But that's a place where you can go and see people setting traps and how they set them. You can look at a whole bunch of different supplies. So that's one thing that's kind of awkward. I guess more and more people are getting used to buying things online without having seen it. But with traps, there's a lot of different varieties. So I feel like, being able to see them and set them yourself can be helpful. So That would be my best advice is try to find one of those conventions and go there and just soak it all in, because it's used to be years ago, and this is before my time, but used to be folks were pretty tight-lipped about trapping advice, and that was when fur prices were high and people didn't want competition, and so if somebody was interested in trapping, you pretty much had to figure it out yourself. Nobody was going to help you.
Yeah.
But that's changed a lot nowadays, and most of the time, if there's somebody that's showing some interest, guys are more than happy to take them aside and try to give them pointers and tips and how they can get started.
Yeah, that's good. It's still a little bit the opposite way over here. It's still a little bit of a secret squirrel business, so to speak. But yeah, it's starting to get to the stage now where more people are starting to realize that, what they're doing isn't such a big a secret anymore. And the more people that know how to do it, the better it is for everyone. So there's plenty of dogs, plenty of, pest animals to go around. That's for sure. So do you guys have like a bounty system or anything over there where they put a bounty on targeted animals?
So there's a few states, all of our stuff varies from state to state. And there are a few states that do have a bounty. I think there's maybe Utah out west has a bounty on coyotes.
Okay.
And South Carolina has talked about doing a bounty on coyotes. I don't think that's passed yet and become law yet. And then there's a few places that'll do a bounty on beaver tails. So that's there's a little bit that I think that had been more popular years ago, and that's just kind of fallen out. So there's not much of that anymore. So there's really, especially with the fur market the way it's been the last few years, I mean, there's been not a lot of incentive for people to trap.
So do you think that there should be a bounty?
I don't think it makes sense from I guess from a kind of a population or biological standpoint. Like the South Carolina is right next door to us, the next state over, and they talked about doing a $75 bounty on coyotes. And while I'd love to get $75 a coyote, I don't think they're not gonna see any impact from that. I think they're just wasting their money, honestly. And so from that standpoint, I mean, sure, I'd be glad to get more money than I can get now, but I don't think it's achieving what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah. Well, that's the case over here. Like there's some not so much states, but we've got, quite big states, but there's some local areas, like council areas, that have bounties as much as $100 a dog. And the next door area doesn't have any bounty, and I don't think that they see a massive difference in the numbers of dogs in those particular areas. So that's one that, I'm going to be trying to do a new segment. That's why I'm asking you the questions on my YouTube channel, asking the local trappers over here these sorts of questions and finding out what they think their opinion on it is, because it doesn't help at all. It just seems that people, as I said, will get into it and they think, oh, beauty, we'll go out and make a heap of money doing this, and then they'll go 5 or 6 days and not catch anything. So then they think, oh, this is too hard. It's not worth $100 a dog, or So yeah, I don't think they make much difference in an area, to be honest. So
yeah.
And I've asked you about the baiting. You guys don't do any sort of baiting over there as far as poison baitings and stuff like that. Do you think that'd be worth like a handy tool for you guys to have over there?
That was actually 1080 used to be used out west, and I think it was very effective on coyotes and wolves and the large predators out west.
Yeah.
I think we had the opposite, that what y'all had is that it affects every one of and I think that's what drove it to get outlawed, was it affects the vultures and the condors that eat the dead coyote that died from 1080, then they die, and so there was a trickle down effect that we saw. That's really neat that you said that that originates in Australia, and so y'all's animals are basically immune to it. I think
Yeah.
that's really impressive. I don't think, I think it could probably, I think it would definitely help in reducing populations. As as people populated as the eastern U.S. is and parts of the western U.S., I think it would wind up being a bad idea, and get us in more trouble than it would be worth for folks to start doing that. So I think we're probably honestly better off without it than we were.
I don't think it definitely helps, the full-time trappers by reducing the numbers, but it helps the bigger problem over here, that's for sure. But yeah, they used to have a lot more restrictions on it over here as well. So they've brought in a new act that we all work under now, which is the Biosecurity Act, and that come in 2014, but they've only just sort of started to implement it now. And the restrictions used to be that it had to be the baits had to be at least 3 kilometres from a build-up area, what they call classified as build-up area, which made sense because if your dog's wandering 3 kilometres away, but now they've actually just recently brought it in under the new act that restriction is only 150 metres away from a dwelling now. So, and it also used to be a minimum of 40 acres where they had to, bait on. But now it's, as long as it's 150 metres away from a dwelling, they can have their baits. So it'll be interesting to see what happens because that's quite dangerous, So
yeah.
But anyway, so what gear do you carry in your trapping bag?
So I got a trowel for digging my holes, and a sifter, a hammer with a kind of a blade on the back of it for digging out trap beds and things, and my stake driver. So I use all disposable stakes. I use all wolf fangs.
Yeah.
I usually wear hip boots because on the way I trap is, if I'll trap anything that's on the property. So if I get permission to trap and there's a pond or there's a big creek with beavers or otters, then I'm going to set traps for everything, coyotes, beavers, and things. And so that kind of gives me my little bit of scent control that I'm looking for on my knees and, from kneeling down. So usually I wear hip boots. And really that's about it. So this year I've been off and on using, I don't know if you've seen the augers that you can use with a power drill.
Yeah.
I haven't used those I've used them a little bit, but our ground is so hard here. I haven't used a lot of them, but I've seen some folks using them with a hammer drill. And I think that will work better on in our hard ground. So I may try to go back to using an auger this season and using a hammer drill and seeing if I can get a better, deeper hole. Cause I kind of, a lot of times I get kind of lazy on my dirt holes, and I'll dig a bigger hole, but only maybe 6 inches because our ground's so hard. And then I'll use just a bar or something to put a punch hole down farther. And I think I would be better off with a bigger hole all the way down, deeper hole, and maybe a little bit more bait. So that's kind of what I'm thinking this year.
Yeah, definitely. No, they're brilliant for that. You can get your hole real deep, and even if you miss whatever you're trying to catch the first time on your trap, they're digging that much that they'll end up getting caught as well. So yeah, I love them. Yeah, they're brilliant. Yeah, that's sort of about all I had for you too, mate. So if I can think of anything else, I know how to contact you now anyway. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.